kind of got the some of the various items ironed out that first March meeting. So and everybody did really well, because there were, I think, 8 or 9 items that we had to move through. So just want to thank the board and everyone for kind of switching so quickly to that method, and looking forward to another successful meeting this evening. So the first things I'm going to do, and then I will turn it over to Chair Anderson. I am going to take a roll call of all of the board members who are in attendance, and then I'll also see who from the public and presenters that we have here with us. For those that are using Skype, please know that we also have a phone conference line call-in number, so I'll also be calling on them, and just to identify themselves. And for the folks that are on the phone conference and the speaker, know that we've got several attendees on Skype as well. So without any hesitation, I'm going to just move in and take a roll call for our board members. And you can just respond by saying present or here. Chair Kristen Anderson. Present. Pam Brunfelt.
Here.
John Decker.
Here.
Lindsay Dyer.
Here.
Elliot James. Elliot. Okay. Philip Kosky.
Present.
Andrea Levasseur.
I'm here.
Rob Mann.
Present.
Steve Olson.
I'm here.
Chris Scholke.
Here.
Catherine Solomon. Catherine?
She can't come tonight.
Okay. John Stark.
Present.
Mary Warner.
Here.
And Frank White.
Here.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to just call off of the public and our presenters on Skype, and then we'll turn to those that are on the phone. Let's see, Barbara Howard.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi, Barbara.
Kristen Schaumler.
Good evening. Here.
Okay, Carolyn.
Hi.
Welcome. Greg out. Okay, Greg maybe stepped away. Julianne.
Hello.
Williams. Luke signed in too. Melinda.
Hello.
Hi, Melinda. And I believe we have Katrina Ringler.
Hi, I'm attending actually from Kansas.
Wonderful, welcome. Okay, now we're going to turn to the anyone on the phone that we didn't call out. If you want to just state your name.
Amy, this is John Disher. We have Steve Warfield is on the phone with us at the moment. And then we have Pam as well, are on the conference line.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, and that was the voice of John Disher. So I didn't mean to skip over our SHPO staff, but John Disher is running the communications and the technology for we have Dennis Gardner, Michelle Decker, and myself. And then David Mather, are you on?
I am here. Hello, everybody.
Hi,
Wonderful.
Hi, David.
All right, thanks everyone. The next item of business that I have is I'm going to read the state's open meeting requirements during a state of emergency. And then I will prompt the board to make a motion so we can begin with the regular portion of the meeting. Public bodies required to comply with the open meeting law must still do so during a state of emergency. Section 13D.021, subdivision 1, permits public bodies to hold meetings via telephone or other electronic means if the conditions of this section are met. The section requires a public body to make a determination that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent because of a health pandemic or an emergency declared under Chapter 12, and the governor has declared an emergency under Chapter 12. The requirements for holding a meeting via telephone or other electronic means include all participating members can hear one another. Members of the public at the physical meeting location can hear all discussion unless attendance at the regular meeting location is not feasible due to the health pandemic. At least one member of the public body is present at the meeting location unless unfeasible due to the health pandemic. And finally, all votes are taken by roll call. So just so everyone knows as well, we have 3 staff members that are in a conference room in the administration building. The other 2 SHPO staff are not in the conference room. We're at other remote locations. And we do not have any members of the public in the meeting location because of the health pandemic. The building is closed it's only open to state staff that are considered critical employees. So I am, after reading that, so we've got these, we are essentially meeting these requirements, and I'm going to prompt a board member to make a motion and the board to adopt these.
Chris Schulke, so moved.
Adopt whatever you want us to.
I will take Chris Schulke as the motion maker and Pam Brunfeld as the seconder.
Yeah, that'll be fine.
Okay.
Hi, Pam.
Hey, Pam.
Bye.
So I will call the motion. So, Kristen, do you want me to take over the roll call for this motion? Continue.
I can do it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, that's my pizza at the door, I think. Chairperson Anderson. Pam Brunfeld. Pam, how do you vote?
What? What do you mean?
How do you vote, Pam?
Yes
On
or
the
no on
motion.
the motion?
I vote yes.
That's a yes from Pam.
Yes, yep. John Decker.
I agree with Pam, yes.
Lindsay?
Yes.
Elliot, are you here? Amy, did you get an answer from Elliot ever? No, but well, we'll come back to him. Philip?
Aye.
Thank you. Andrea?
Yes.
Thank you. Rob?
Yes.
Steve?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
John Stark?
Aye.
Mary Warner?
Aye.
And Frank.
Aye.
Okay. We're good. Anything else, Amy?
No, that's it. Thank you, Chair Anderson. So just a final couple reminders from me before I will hand everything over to the chair. The meeting is being recorded. We ask that you all mute your microphone if you are not speaking. You can also use the instant messaging chat feature in Skype if you have a question. So we have staff that are going to be monitoring that. And when you speak, please identify your name for the purposes of the recording and just given that we have people that are remote. So that is all I have. Are there any questions from anyone before we move forward with the regular portion of our meeting?
Amy, this is Philip Koski.
Mm-hmm.
At the last meeting, I think in the chat area, if we had a question, we were supposed to type Q or something like that.
Yeah, Q plus is that's kind of the symbol or letters to use if you do have a question. So certainly feel free to just type in a Q plus or Q, or we'll know, and we can prompt the chair that there's a question there.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Okay, I'm going to hand it over and have Chair Anderson take it from here.
Okay, thanks, Amy. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Minnesota State Historic Preservation Review Board for the National Register of Historic Places. My name is Kristen Anderson. I'm currently chair of the review board. The board's purpose this evening is to consider the nomination of properties to the National Register of Historic Places. As most of you know, the National Register is a federal list of those places deemed worthy of preservation. A nomination form has been completed for each of the properties that will be considered tonight. Each nomination form has been sent to the review board members, and each member has had an opportunity to study it prior to this meeting. The owners of nominated properties, local officials, and interested local groups have been notified of this meeting. All have been invited to send written comments about the nomination and to attend this meeting. Some of you may wish to speak this evening about a particular property. You are welcome to do so, and I encourage you to address yourself to the question of whether the property meets the criteria of significance of the National Register. These criteria are the standards against which the review board will evaluate the nominations. This evaluation is the board's only assignment. These criteria have been established by federal regulation. Copies of the criteria have been sent to owners of nominated properties and to the other parties I mentioned earlier. A description of the National Register program has also been sent to them. Each of the nominations will be presented by a staff member. Persons viewing the meeting remotely will then be given an opportunity to comment. These comments should be limited to 3 minutes. The State Historic Preservation Review Board will then discuss the nomination, and a vote by the board will follow. Should a nomination be determined this evening to meet the criteria for inclusion on the National Register, the nomination will be forwarded to the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer, Amy Spong. Should she agree that the property meets the criteria and that the nomination is in proper form, she will sign the nomination and forward it to the National Register office in Washington, D.C., where it will be reviewed once more. The process is a lengthy one, but it is calculated to subject each property to rigorous evaluation. Before we begin, I'd like to ask the members of the State Historic Preservation Review Board to introduce themselves, briefly stating the role they fill on the review board and their particular expertise. And as will be the case with all of our votes this evening, we'll do this alphabetically. That'll help you know when you need to unmute yourself, if you remember the alphabet, that is. So I'm Kristen Anderson. I am an architectural historian. I teach at Augsburg University. And Pam, you're next.
I'm Pam Roosevelt. I'm a retired history teacher at Vermillion Community College. I am doing research right now as a historian.
John Decker.
Hey, my name's John Decker. I'm a semi-retired archivist. And I've been a board member for 8 years now.
And Lindsay.
I am Lindsay Dyer, member at large, and I am librarian, archivist, and public historian.
Thank you. Elliot, yet? Nope. Okay. Philip.
Philip Koski. I fill the role of historical architect, and I am a practicing architect.
Thank you. Andrea.
My name's Andrea Lavasser. I am a prehistoric archaeologist, and I am retired from the Chippewa National Forest, where I was the forest archaeologist and heritage program manager.
Thanks, Andrea. Rob is next.
Yeah, I'm the historical archaeologist, and I am associate professor of anthropology at St. Cloud State University.
Thank you. Steve Olson is next.
I am a member at large, and I am a professional civil engineer and a bridge engineer.
Steve, Chris Schulke is next.
Hi, Chris Schulke. I'm a public historian and Executive Director at the Otter Tail County Historical Society.
John Stark.
Hi, I'm John Stark. I'm an historical architect and practice as an architect in the Twin Cities.
Thank you. Mary Warner.
Hi, I'm Mary Warner. I'm a member at large and I'm Executive Director of the Morrison County Historical Society.
Thanks, Mary. And Frank White.
I'm Frank White. I'm a member at large and I am a historian.
Frank. Okay, our next task is to approve the minutes from the March 24th meeting. Any comments about the minutes? Or a motion to approve? When you're ready.
This is Mary Warner. I so move.
Thanks,
John
Mary.
Stark, second.
Thanks, John Stark. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Oh, wait, that's not how we're working these days. Kristen Anderson, I say yes. Pam?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I say yes.
John Decker?
Aye.
Lindsay Dyer?
Yes.
Philip?
Aye.
Andrea?
Yes.
Rob?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
John Stark?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
And Frank?
Aye.
Thanks, everybody. And now we move on to the nominations. This would be a good time for all of us to mute our microphones, and we'll hand over to Dennis. Dennis, are you up for the Winona Athletic Club?
I am. Good evening.
Excellent.
Good evening, everybody. Just one quick reminder, if we have any, if there's any grammatical issues or punctuational things, typos, that kind of thing, if you guys could just send that to Michelle or I, so we could, we'll make sure we make those corrections in the nominations. We don't necessarily have to address those tonight. Okay, so our first property is the Winona Athletic Club in Winona County. The author is Greg Gowd. This property's nomination was sponsored by a Minnesota Cultural and Historical Grants. It's part of the Historical Grants Program. The Winona Athletic Club in Winona was begun by young Polish-American men at the turn of the 20th century, and the fraternal organization built a new clubhouse in 1931. It is a two-story rectangular brick building trimmed in limestone. It has a curious aesthetic, generally reflecting the classical modern version of Art Deco. However, the limestone entrance tower also has Gothic revival characteristics. The north facade and east side are the most embellished elevations of the building. The Winona Athletic Club proved immensely popular in the East End neighborhood of Winona as a social gathering place and social activity center for the local Polish-American community. And here we're looking at the north facade, and our view here is to the southwest. As noted, the clubhouse is located in the East End neighborhood of Winona. It fronts along 5th Street with its east elevation paralleling Mankato Avenue. And we can see in the image at left here, you see that yellow star. That's the East End, and that's roughly where the building is. The image at right is a closer view, an overhead view, and we can see the building kind of outlined in yellow there at the intersection of Mankato and East 5th Street. Here we see the remaining elevations of the building. At top left, we are viewing the west elevation, while in the middle image, we see the east elevation. The photo at far right depicts the south rear. The limestone entrance tower, the side of which is apparent at the west elevation, is perhaps the most striking architectural component of the building, although the facade and east side are also articulated with pilasters with stone caps and bases, which parcel the many windows. The interior of the building is composed of various meeting rooms and activity areas. The bar is located on the first floor, while the kitchen and auditorium are on the second floor. The bowling alley is in the basement. A shower room and the heating plant also occupy part of the basement. Here we see the auditorium at left. Our view is to the south toward the stage. At right is the entrance to the auditorium. We see the ticket and coat check windows to the right of the image. Our view here is also to the south. The first floor bar is at left, and our view is to the southwest, while the bowling alley is at right with our view to the north. The image at upper left is a rendering of the building in 1930, shortly before the construction began, while the bottom center image is the building soon after construction. The top right photo shows the building when it was nearing a decade old. The Winona Athletic Club was founded after the local Polish Catholic parish, St. Stanislaus. The club was established in 1898 by several second-generation Polish-American young men. The idea behind the club was to have a place to socialize in a male environment that largely focused on athletics and other types of games. This fraternalism was not unusual at this time, as many fraternal organizations were forming around the turn of the 20th century, most of them sex-segregated. Nationally, the largest fraternal organizations proved to be the Masons and Oddfellows. In time, the athletic club welcomed the Winona Athletic Club Auxiliary with a substantial membership. In fact, the year the building at 5th and Mankato was completed, 75 women gathered in the auditorium to approve a constitution and elect officers. Soon after its founding, membership in the Winona Athletic Club was growing, and it would become substantial. Initially, the club only accepted single men of good character. That soon changed as members began getting married. Within a couple of years of its founding, the club stopped meeting in homes and rented a clubhouse in the East End. The club merged with other local related organizations, including a baseball club, and its membership continued to swell. With its membership over 100 by the early 1920s, the club searched for larger quarters, and this would happen on a few occasions as membership continued to expand. By the end of 1923, the club had more than 250 members. Sports activities such as baseball, basketball, bowling, and billiards were very popular at this time, and club members participated in these events as players and spectators. The Winona Athletic Club had become a core institution to those in the East End. The photo at upper left shows some of the members from 1922, while that at right shows individual photos of members from 1925. This display still hangs in the first floor hallway of the athletic club. By the early 1930s, the club had grown so much that it had built its new two-story building with substantial space for various activities. The club regularly organized dances in its sizable auditorium, often featuring the band sponsored by the club and called the Winona Athletic Club Band. We see an ad for a 1933 dance at upper left featuring the band. The bowling alley certainly was very popular, as was the bar. The image at lower center features the Polish National Alliance baseball team from 1939, a sports team supported by the Winona Athletic Club. The image at far right depicts members celebrating the 50th anniversary of the construction of its building at 5th and Mankato, complete with a cake mimicking the club's home. Our period of significance is 1931. Our level of significance is local. The National Register criterion is A, and areas of significance, ethnic heritage, European, and entertainment, recreation. The period of significance begins with the year the clubhouse was constructed and ends when the membership of the club's benefit association peaked and began its slow decline. Immigrants from the Kashubian region of Poland established a cohesive community at the East End of Winona in the late 1800s. While priority number one was creating a Polish-speaking Catholic parish, in 1898, second-generation Polish-American men formed the Winona Athletic Club. In time, the organization became second only to the church in its importance to the Polish community. The organization was able to erect an impressive clubhouse by the early 1930s, which still stands today as a reflection of the central role it played in the lives of the East End immigrant community. For this reason, it is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. And we do not have any correspondence with this.
Thanks, Dennis. Is there anyone from the audience who would like to address this nomination or speak about the nomination? Okay. And is there anyone on the board who has comments or questions?
Kristen, it looks like Philip has a question.
Okay, Philip.
Yeah, I find this building to be quite striking, and it's a handsome little jewel box. The auditorium has an unfortunate 2x2 lay-in ceiling that was installed later. I'm wondering if there was any historical documentation of what the ceiling of that space might have been like, and if anybody has confirmed whether that is still intact.
Greg, are you here? Can you answer that? Dennis, do you know?
Yeah.
I am here, yes.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Greg. Can you answer that?
I'm here, but Luke Sims, I think, who is also online. Luke, are you there? Luke?
Yes, I'm here.
Luke actually, at my request, got on a ladder and put his head up above that drop ceiling. And so he might be able to answer that question a little better than I can.
Yes. We went on a fun ladder adventure into the ceiling, and actually above that drop ceiling is another drop ceiling. The barrel vaulted roof we expected to be visible from above that initial drop ceiling, but unfortunately there was another ceiling there. We actually didn't have a ladder high enough to get up there to check out what that was made out of, unfortunately.
Thanks, Luke. Philip, does that answer the question?
It does, but are there any historical drawings, original blueprints that might indicate what it might have looked like?
Not that I was able to locate when I was doing the research, no.
Okay, thank you.
There is the actual Winona County Historical Society has quite a bit of material from this architectural firm, but they just didn't have plans for this building, unfortunately.
Mary has a question.
Yep. So this is Mary Warner. Just for a point of curiosity, because so much of this building just looks like it's in such great shape and original condition. But the nomination mentions that the restroom, kitchen, and storage floors are covered with linoleum. And I was just wondering if that was original.
Well, it sure looks like it's original. I'm pretty sure it is. Those are kind of the work areas, and I think that's what the original flooring was in those areas.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Any other questions? Comments, discussion? Anybody?
I have a comment.
Is that John? Board Member Decker?
John Decker, Member Decker, yes. It's very unusual to have a bowling alley in an athletic club. That's, to me, I've been on a few of them, and this is the first one. So I'm really glad that they have it, but I'm sad that they're not using it.
Yeah, Kristen, if I may comment on that.
Sure, absolutely, Greg, thanks.
My research indicated that actually bowling was amazingly popular in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, in particular in immigrant communities, especially Polish communities in Chicago and other places in the Midwest. And the bowling alley in the basement of the Winona Athletic Club was enormously popular. You may remember in the nomination there was periods when there was 125 leagues or 125 teams playing in leagues in that one bowling alley. Unfortunately, the pin setters that are there in the basement now were installed in the 60s sometime. I'm not sure exactly what date, but probably in the mid 60s. And about 3 or 4 years ago, they decided that they could no longer maintain them, either both because they didn't have the skilled labor to do it, and also because they weren't able to get parts anymore. But Luke and I went down to the basement and looked at them, and those 6 pin setting machines are just gigantic. I don't know what's going to happen with them because they don't work, and on the other hand, they're so enormous. I don't know how you'd ever get them out of there either. So it's going to be an interesting problem.
Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Any other questions or comments? John Stark has a question. Board Member Stark?
You have to take the mute off to talk, don't you? Yeah, Greg, next to the lanes in the basement there, it looks like there's a seating area along that. Is that like a dining area or something, or?
No, yeah, along the right-hand side, where there's like a wood partition and windows, yeah, that is a seating area. It was also a passageway. That was the way you got back to the rooms in the rear of the building, which were the like shower rooms and also the mechanical rooms. But there were, you can see there's windows along there, and so there was chairs right all the way along for people to view. Yeah, there you see.
Yep, there you go.
See the windows there. Yeah, so it was both a passageway and also a kind of a narrow audience area with chairs.
Okay. Yeah, I know there in St. Paul there's a little bowling alley in the basement of an old building that has a very similar layout like that. Yeah. That's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. And I think to Philip's question, I believe it was in the report, talked about ducts and all sorts of stuff between the ceilings up there in the auditorium area space too. So that'd be a tough thing to reverse without some major redo. The last question I have is, the building still active as the club?
Yes, it is. I mean, it's still chugging along. Obviously, it's not like it was in the 40s and 50s by any means, but the bar is open every day, every afternoon. There's activities going on in the ballroom upstairs, and I saw just in the local Winona newspaper, they just had an election and got a new board installed. So it's hanging in there, but obviously something has to happen, to keep it going. It has a lot of potential. One of the things that probably would really need in the long run would be an elevator, because the ballroom, I think, could be a very interesting venue for weddings, etc., dances. But these days without an elevator, that's probably not going to work very well. So I'm hopeful that it's going to redefine itself and continue along as the Winona Athletic Club.
It's a great little building.
This is Pam. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Go ahead, Pam.
Okay. In place of an elevator, you might want to consider a chairlift. The Culliva Hall in Virginia gets along very well without an elevator, and this building might suit for a chairlift that would get people up to the ballroom.
Thank you.
They're a lot less expensive.
Yeah, right.
It's a code issue.
Anything else?
Yeah, but I would guess that the chair would be fit within the code if you worked with the fire department. Culliva Hall has about 30 steps that people have to go up.
Anything else? You ready for a motion?
This is Pam, I would move the approval of this building.
I second it. Board Member Decker, second.
Okay, seconds. Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay. Chair Anderson votes yes. Pam is next.
Yes.
Board Member Decker.
Yes.
Board Member Dyer.
Yes.
Board Member Koski.
Aye.
Board Member Lavasser.
Yes.
Board Member Mann.
Yes.
Board Member Olson.
Aye.
Board Member Schulke.
Yes.
Board Member Stark.
Yes.
Board Member Warner.
Yes.
Board Member White.
Yes.
Good, thanks everybody. And Dennis, are we ready for the next?
We are.
Okay, United States Bedding Company in St. Paul, Ramsey County.
Yep. This is the United States Bedding Company, St. Paul, Ramsey County. The author's Julianne Murphy from McCroskey Historic Advisors, LLC. The United States Bedding Company is an industrial complex formed of several components that were built over the decades as the company grew in prominence. Established in 1898, the company ultimately became a major local and regional mattress manufacturer, famous for its king coil mattresses. The 1918 sections of the complex, as well as the 1920 editions, were built before U.S. Bedding Company moved to the site and occupied the factory building. And here we have a view of the complex as we are looking southwest. The company is located at the intersection of Vandalia Street and Wabash Avenue in an industrial section of St. Paul. In the image at left, we see the company in the center of the image. It is just a short distance north of Interstate Highway 94 and a short distance south of University Avenue. The image at right is a closer view showing the various sections that make up the complex. There are two principal components of the complex, the factory building and the warehouse. But each of these components is composed of sections built at various times, with the earliest built in 1918 and the last built in 1955. The multi-story factory building is at the west side of the property, and the single-story warehouse is at the east side. A third structure is also included, and that is the hemispherical bottom water tower. In these two images, we are looking at sections of the factory building. In the photo at left, we see the east elevation of the factory building, with the legs of the water tower also apparent. This section of the factory was constructed in 1918. At far right in the photo is an addition constructed in 1920. The photo at right shows the 1920 addition in the left part of the photo, as well as another circa 1920 addition at the right side of the photo. In both photos, we are looking at east elevations, with our view to the southwest in the left image and to the northwest in the right image. At top left, we are viewing the north elevation of the circa 1920 addition. Our view is to the south. The photo in the middle is to the north, is the north elevation of a section of the 1918 building. Our view here is also to the south. And the photo at right shows the west elevations of both 1918 sections of the building along Vandalia. Again, the view is to the south. In the photo at left, we are looking at the south end of the west elevation of one of the 1918 sections, which served as an office entrance. A king coil sign is painted on the overhead brick wall. Our view is to the east. The photo at right shows a two-story addition built in 1940 that extends from the south wall of the 1918 section. Our view there is to the northeast. Here we see several interior views of the factory building. Much of the factory building is an open floor plan, interspersed with columns, some concrete and some timber. The two images to the left reflect the open floor plan with concrete structural systems. In the top left image, we are looking at the lobby, and our view is to the east. The image at bottom left is a first floor leasable area. Our view is also to the east. The image at top middle is one of the stairwells in the factory building. We are looking west. And the bottom right photo shows access from one 1918 section of the factory building to the other 1918 section. Our view is to the north. These views are of interior spaces of the factory building, again depicting largely open areas with columns, although the structural system in these spaces are largely formed of timbers. At the top left, we are looking to the northwest, while in the bottom middle, our view is to the south. At top right, we are looking northeast. The second major component of the complex is the single-story warehouse, which we see in both of these photos. The image at left is the north facade, with our view to the southwest. while the image at right is the west elevation, with our view to southeast. The westernmost section of the warehouse was built first and features a gabled roof. The east section of the warehouse has a flat roof. The warehouse's south rear is at left, with our view generally to the east, and the east elevation is at right, where we are looking north and west. As in the factory building, interior spaces are mostly open, although hallways have been created in areas with partition walls. At top left, we are looking north. The middle image is a view to the northwest, and the bottom right photo, we are looking south. Today, the warehouse is home to Lake Monster Brewing Company, as well as the Gremlin Theater. The U.S. Bedding Company was founded in 1898 in the home of the owner, Samuel Bronstein, a Russian Jewish immigrant who came to the United States in 1840. Initially, he worked in a grocery store in St. Paul, eventually marrying the store owner's daughter, Anna. Anna and he subsequently opened their own grocery store. However, it ultimately did not succeed. Anna and Samuel eventually began making mattresses out of their home on St. Paul's Goodrich Avenue. The business grew very rapidly, and the company moved into successively larger quarters. They moved to the site at Vandalia and Wabash in 1927, after suffering a fire at their previous quarters. The letters S and B for Samuel Bronstein were stitched into each mattress the company made as an early marketing effort. However, over time, the meaning of the S and B changed. It was meant to be short for, quote, sleep better. At the top left, we see a 1928 rendering of the U.S. Bedding Company. At bottom middle is a 1920 advertisement for the SB mattress, one of the company's early mattresses. And at top right is a circa 1945 view of the exterior of the factory building with company trucks lined up. Notice how the sides of the trucks feature advertisements for the King Coil mattress. This is the mattress for which the company became so well known. All three of these historic images are from 1928 and depict employees creating various components of the mattresses. By the early 1930s, the company believed that it had created the best coil spring available, so it ran a contest in the Midwest to name its new spring bed. A 13-year-old African-American girl from Bismarck, North Dakota won the contest for her suggestion of King Coil. Arabelle Thompson was invited to St. Paul to accept her $25 bond. The company also asked if she would be willing to pen a poem about the spring, which she subsequently did. It was titled Old King Coil and was published in a trade journal by the company. Arabelle Thompson later became a successful journalist and served as a longtime editor for Ebony magazine. After the Second World War, the company continued to grow, led by the next generation of Bronsteins. But by the late 1960s, it was no longer the same company it had been. It continued to be successful, but by this point, it was part of a much larger conglomeration with a national focus. Moreover, by 1968, the family-run business was no longer entirely family-run, as many from outside the family now became managers of the company and sat on its board. The period of significance is 1927 to 1968. The level of significance local. National Register criterion is A, and areas of significance are industry and commerce. The period of significance for the complex begins in 1927 with the occupation of the Vandalia Street complex, ending in 1968 when the United States Bedding Company ceased being a local and regional company. Founded in the owner's home, the United States Bedding Company became a very successful local and regional manufacturer of mattresses. With success, it grew, reflected in the various components that make up the complex. Because of its significance in mattress manufacturing, this palpably industrial property is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. And I should also note that this property recently began undergoing rehabilitation, employing the tax credits for historic rehabilitation. We do not have any correspondence for this one.
Thank you, Dennis. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to make any comments about this nomination? Okay, anybody on the board have comments? John Stark.
Yeah, this was really interesting. You know, it looks like just a big old worn out warehouse, and with a lot of things have changed in it. But the history of bedding was fascinating. It was really fun to see what was there, and I know I've slept on king coils. I won't say anything about the comfort level of them, but I know I've slept on them before. Question though, with what Dennis said was about, and maybe Julianne can answer it too, the building has gone through a number of recent renovations. Is the current renovation that it's going to be going through new, or is it tied in with the theater or the brewery, or were those just something that came in and did their own thing?
Julianne?
Yeah, this is Julianne, if I can take that one. So the changes that the building has most recently undergone were under a different owner than the present owner, and those were completed in 2014. And so our owner and applicant got involved in 2018, and their proposal is to keep the existing tenants that are there, which are mostly in the warehouse building and in section C of the building, and they're focusing the rehabilitation efforts on sections E, sorry, even I, it is a complex, to the former boiler room and the front portion of the factory building. And also as part of the rehabilitation, they are going to, I think what's maybe distracting about the primary elevation are that there are a number of non-historic windows. And so I think one of the significant contributions of the rehabilitation project is going to be to update those windows with more historically appropriate replacements.
Okay. One last question then on that is, you're talking section A, B, C, D, E, and all that stuff. Any reason why it's not taking the oldest section as A and then B, just to help understand what's going on or not?
I did not. These were already named when I was handed the project. So I just went with what everyone else was already working off of. So I have no idea why.
That makes sense. Okay, that's it.
And we have a question from Steve Olson.
Where you may see a collection of architectural elements that are just not cohesive, maybe, I see an archaeological playground for structural engineers. But I guess my one comment here is the way the water tower is described in the nomination in a couple places. It's described as a gravity-fed water tower. And I'm curious about that label. I guess I usually associate a gravity-fed element having a higher water body feeding a lower. Could anyone talk about that?
Julianne, did you have an answer for that one, or is that something that Steve? I mean, you're board member Olson. You're our engineer. Is there another term that you think would be more appropriate for us to use?
I might just be silent. I'm sure the water is pumped up to the tank and then it falls with gravity as an outlet to service the building. So I think the description without how it's fed might be just fine all by itself, Dennis.
Okay, sounds good.
And we have a question from board member Warner. Mary?
Yes, I was curious about the water tower too. So why does this factory need its own water tower was the big question I had. And then how does we've seen a number of nominations of water towers, and how might this one compare to the other ones that we have nominated?
Mary, I can answer your second part there. Yes, we've seen a number of these hemispherical bottoms. They are becoming increasingly rare. I cannot, off the top of my head, recall when this particular one was constructed. But yeah, we've seen a number of these early hemispherical bottoms that have been nominated. I don't know if this one would be eligible by itself, but certainly contributing to the complex. Steve, I'm sorry, Board Member Olson, could you answer the first part of the question about why the complex would have a water tower?
I'll just make a hypothesis that with all the materials that were used in the construction of the mattresses, there were a lot of flammable materials there, and they had already suffered one fire event, and so I would think they were playing defensive insurance, would be my guess, Dennis.
This is Julianne. I'm sorry, I lost my connection earlier, but I'm back. From what I was able to gather, the water tower went in before the mattress factory was there, and the industry that was in the building before the mattress factory was a tire factory. So I'd imagine whatever process there is into making a tire in 1920, it was rather labor intensive and would require maybe some of the power from the water tower.
This is Board Member Warner again. Is there some way you can add that in there? Because this is so curious to me that this, complex would have its own tower, and I would think that might be a question in people's mind in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Board Member Koski has a question. Philip. Philip, are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Thank you.
I have a question about one of the photographic exhibits. It's on page 7 of 46. There's a hand-painted sign on a brick wall, and I know that this was fairly common. I don't know if this is original and then somebody had refurbished it, or if somebody simply added it later. Do we have any information about that?
Yeah, so from what I can tell, this was done as part of the previous renovations, which were not part of a tax credit rehabilitation. So I believe there was a ghost sign in that location that they did repaint, which obviously may not have occurred had that project been a tax credit project, but it was done as part of that 2014 renovation.
Thank you.
Yep.
This is Chair Anderson. Julianne, I have a question. I didn't see any information about architects or contractors here. Do you know what's going on with that?
I don't. I mean, I pulled all the permit history that I could find. There were a couple of references to contractors on really small additions, like the addition to a ramp addition to the warehouse building. But other than that, a lot of times they would write self. So I think because this was such a family business, a lot of times the kind of especially interior changes they were making to the building really appear to be ad hoc, and they were doing them themselves. So I wasn't able to locate any architect or large contractor that was associated with the project.
I was just really curious about it, and so I looked, and I did locate Liebenberg and Kaplan as ongoing architects for this company in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. And they're a pretty well-known Twin Cities firm, and I'm not sure, I mean, they're known for their theaters, for instance. I'm not sure about the industrial buildings, and I would encourage you to dig into that a little bit.
I will. Yeah, it's curious that they weren't listed on at least the original building, the big building permits. But sure. Yeah, I'm definitely willing to dig into that.
There are working drawings at the Northwest Architectural Archives in the Liebenberg and Kaplan papers. So it's it might be, it's just important information to have in your nomination, I think. And there might be some interesting angles and stories that come from this ongoing decades-long relationship with the company. So I definitely encourage you to dig into that a little bit more.
I absolutely will. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Any other questions or comments? Are we ready for a motion?
This is Pam.
Hi, Pam.
I move that we accept this nomination.
Board Member Brunfeld. Yeah, Brunfeld has made a motion. Is there a second?
Board Member Schulke, second.
Thank you, Chris. Any other discussion? Okay. Chair Anderson votes yes. Pam?
Yes.
John Decker?
Yes.
Lindsay Dyer?
Yes.
Elliot, are you here yet? Nope. Philip Koski?
Aye.
Andrea?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Steve Olson?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
John Stark?
Aye.
Mary Warner? Mary Board Member Warner? Okay, Board Member White?
Is she muted?
Mary, are you muted? She's probably saying yes, 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 yes. Okay, let's jump to Frank White, Board Member White.
Yes.
Thank you. And one more try with the Board Member Warner. I think it's going to pass whether she votes yes or no. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you. And Dennis, are we doing multiple property documentation first?
Yes, so this is a multiple property documentation form titled Prints, 1958 to 1987. The author is Kristen Jungler.
Wait. This is Pam. There's a mistake on the slideshow. It says 1958 to 1957.
Yes, ma'am, I corrected that. Unfortunately, you got the old one there. I caught it just before the meeting.
Okay.
But Dennis, before you continue, can I remind everybody that they should please mute themselves to make the quality of Dennis's audio as good as possible? Thank you.
Again, the author is Kristen Jungler, with contributions by Barbara Mitchell Howard of Stonebridge Learning, as well as Jessica Berglund of Hess Royce & Company. What is a multiple property documentation form? The multiple property documentation form, or more commonly known as MPDF, is a cover document and not a nomination in its own right, but serves as a basis for evaluating the National Register eligibility of related properties. It may be used to nominate and register thematically related historic properties simultaneously, or to establish the registration requirements for properties that may be nominated in the future. The MPDF streamlines the method of organizing information collected in surveys and research for registration and preservation planning purposes. The form facilitates the evaluation of individual properties by comparing them with resources that share similar physical characteristics and historical associations. Information common to the group of properties is presented in the MPDF, while information specific to each individual building, site, district, structure, or object is placed on an individual National Register registration form. Although there are several sections to an MPDF, there are two primary sections, sections E and F. Section E is a historic context, while Section F provides associated property types and offers the registration requirements, the standards by which we determine if a particular property is eligible for listing in the National Register. Most of the time, in fact, the vast majority of the time, an MPDF covers properties of a particular type. such as banks or bridges or railroading properties or finished log cabins. The NPDF we are looking at does so as well, but with something of a twist. In this instance, we are covering properties associated with a particular individual, Prince Rogers Nelson, commonly known as Prince. That means the NPDF can be used to evaluate a house in which Prince may have resided, or a school that he attended, or a studio where he recorded. In other words, it can be many different property types, but all are associated with Prince and the development, or lack thereof, of his talent and skill. Because of this association, the criterion considered is criterion B, association with a prominent individual. The goal with this presentation is not to repeat the contextual history on Prince found in the NPDF. The Minnesota State Review Board has already read the history, and others can access the NPDF and read the extensive and interesting history via the Minnesota State Historic Preservation Office website. Instead, the principal aim is to explain the purpose of the NPDF and highlight examples of the associated property types and note the registration requirements. Again, it is these requirements which allow us to make future determinations as to whether or not a particular property associated with Prince is eligible for listing in the National Register. If I may offer a hypothetical, say, for example, the Minnesota Department of Transportation is completing a survey of properties in a particular part of Minneapolis in an effort to determine if any may be eligible for listing in the National Register. If the agency comes across a property associated with Prince and the growth of his skills, be it a house, school, studio, etc., it can turn to the NPDF for guidance in determining whether or not that property is eligible for listing in the National Register. It is important to note that, although we are not repeating the NPDF's historic context tonight, the context is vital for determining the property types tied to Prince and for establishing the registration requirements. It is only through the thorough research and reasoned writing and analysis that the author can formulate the standards that inform us as to what makes one property associated with Prince more distinct than another. It is also important to state that the context begins in 1958, with the birth of Prince, and ends in 1987. It was in October of 1987 that Prince opened his artist compound in Paisley Park in Chanhassen, Minnesota, marking a shift in the location of residential, recording, and performing aspects of his life. So what are the property types associated with Prince covered by this NPDF? According to the NPDF, in addition to Prince's birthplace and early residences, 3 property types with potential significance were identified. 1, writing, practice, and rehearsal locations. Properties where Prince mastered songwriting, key instruments, and dance/choreography. 2, recording locations. Properties where Prince recorded songs and albums and mastered recording techniques. Subtypes include residential studios, commercial studios, and concert venues. And 3, performance locations. Properties where Prince performed live and in front of a camera. Subtypes include concert venues and filming locations. To reiterate, a venue falling into one of these categories may not resemble the typical property type. For instance, Prince recorded in commercial studios, certainly, but he also recorded in residences. The circa 1975 image in this slide shows Prince, second from right, with the band Grand Central. Prince was roughly 16 years old at this point. Here are some residences within which Prince resided. At top left is Prince's second childhood home in Minneapolis, where he lived between the ages of 6 and 12. At lower middle is the Minneapolis residence of Prince's aunt, Olivia Lewis. Prince resided here off and on between the ages of 13 and 16. At upper right is Prince's father's house in Minneapolis, where Prince briefly lived off and on between the ages of 14 and 15. It is likely that in each of these residences, Prince developed his musical abilities. However, that does not necessarily make them eligible for listing in the National Register. In order to determine if any of them are eligible, it would be necessary to complete research on each house and then contrast what is discovered with what is stated in the registration requirements of the NPDF. In this slide, we see one example of a writing practice and rehearsal location associated with Prince. This is the Way Community Center on Plymouth Avenue in Minneapolis, where Prince and other youngsters practice on the various instruments that were provided. The community center, however, has subsequently been razed. According to the registration requirements in the NPDF, quote, writing, practice, and rehearsal locations will be considered eligible for listing in the National Register under Criterion B if they have direct associations with key points in Prince's formative years and productive life through 1987, including the mastery of songwriting, dance and choreography, and key instruments such as vocals, piano, and guitar. The properties must be well documented as to their association with Prince and his mastery of the specific skill in that unique location. They must also retain sufficient integrity from the period Prince was associated with the property. Examples of recording locations include the Moon Sound Studio at left. Prince and owner Chris Moon met for the first time here in 1976. At right is Sound 80, where Prince completed his demo tapes and began recording his first album, For You, in 1977. The registration requirements in the NPDF explain, quote, recording locations will be considered eligible for listing in the National Register under Criterion B if they have a direct association with Prince prior to and including 1987 and are well documented as to their use as a recording location for songs or albums important to the development of the Minneapolis sound, for critically and or commercially significant songs or albums, or for Prince's mastery of studio engineering techniques. The properties must retain sufficient integrity from the period Prince was associated with the property. Examples of performance locations include the Capri Theater in Minneapolis. Prince is depicted performing there in 1979 in the image at upper left. And of course, First Avenue, which is shown at bottom right, where Prince may be best known, at least locally, for performing. The registration requirements in the NPDF state, quote, performance locations will be considered eligible for listing in the National Register under Criterion B if they have a well-documented and direct association with Prince prior to and including 1987. Concert venues will be considered significant if they served as a regular live performance space or when a particular live performance is well documented as being significant to the development of the Minneapolis sound or within a significant era of Prince's career. Filming venues are considered significant only when the property is a regularly or prominently featured location in a critically or commercially significant movie or music video. Performance locations must retain sufficient integrity from the period Prince was associated with the property. The NPDF Prince 1958 to 1987 is filled with many properties associated with the extraordinary musician. It contains an entire list of properties associated with him, properties that were discovered during the course of research for the NPDF. The Minnesota SHPO encourages all to read it. We suspect that it's unlike most any other writings on Prince. For this document not only covers the early life of Prince, but shares the places in Minneapolis where he matured, developed his gifts, and made his name. And it is not filled simply with the major properties of which we are all familiar, but the numerous modest, humble properties as well. In closing, our hope is that this documentation will be a welcome addition to the body of scholarship on Prince, and we believe it will be a very useful document going forward as we discover additional properties tied to the musician. It will help us draw distinctions between those properties of historic significance and those of limited significance. The SHPO requests that the Minnesota State Review Board, after having read this documentation, vote to forward this NPDF to the keeper of the National Register. And we do not have any correspondence with this.
Thanks, Dennis. Any comments from the audience about this? Do any of the authors want to speak? Okay, and how about the board? Don't see anything. Oh, I see Philip is typing. Philip, does that mean you have a question? Yes, it does. Go ahead, Board Member Koski.
Thank you. In the attachments at the end of the MPDF, page 114 is what I'm looking at. There are maps that indicate properties according to 4 different conditions. One is it meets MPDF criteria, it does not meet MPDF criteria, or it has not been evaluated, or it's been demolished. So I'm curious about the not evaluated category, and my question is, have they not been evaluated because they didn't meet a minimum threshold to merit further consideration, or is it just because of lack of time and resources that you couldn't obviously catalog every single property?
Kristen, did you want to tackle that one?
Sure. Hi, this is Kristen Schumler. Philip, yeah, it's more to do with the latter. We just simply didn't have the time or resources to do a full evaluation of the majority of the properties. Clearly, if one was demolished, we indicated that. But this was really an effort focused on a few select properties at this time.
So if I could have a follow-up question to that, then that means it's still an open question whether or not it would merit the MPDF criteria. And if somebody were to do additional work, that could be added at a later time?
Yes. As Dennis was explaining, this is hopefully going to provide a context so as projects or property owners or others in the future decide they want to apply the criteria and see if a particular property needs it, they can use this framework to do that work at that time.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
It's Board Member Schulke. I have a question.
Hey, Chris, go ahead.
So, how is it unusual to do this type of form nomination, or not nomination, but this project for a entertainer? I mean, it's not your typical historic figure, I guess. So I want to, is this quite unusual to run across your office?
Chris, Board Member Schulke, yes, it is. It is different. It's definitely different. Most of the time, MPDFs cover things, like I had mentioned, like railroading properties or bridges or banks, that kind of thing. But that doesn't mean that it cannot cover properties associated with an individual. In fact, we do have one MPDF, I forget the gentleman's name now, and it's like his log cabins designed by this particular builder. But I cannot remember the gentleman's name off the top of my head. But that's the only MPDF I can think of that we have in our office that's actually tied to another individual.
Well, I'm going to be very curious to see what the National Park Service, the Keeper's Office, their response is. I'm very curious.
Yes, so am I. So am I. That being said, I can tell you that if I recall correctly, somebody from the National Park Service understood that this MPDF was being produced, and they were rather anxious to read it.
Anxious in a good way, Dennis, or?
Oh, I'm sorry, that's right. I kind of used a bad word there. In a good way, in a good way.
Is that okay, Chris? Did you get answers for what you wondered about?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
You bet. Board Member Stark appears in the question list. John?
Yes. My only reference to something like this is kind of like a historic district, but it's not quite the same. Are property owners notified that they're being included on this, and are there any restrictions on what they do with their properties?
Board member Stark, no, there's no restrictions on them. And again, this isn't actually a nomination. We're not nominating anything. This is just a cover document, you know, and it's just highlighting the various properties that have been discovered during the course of research over the last couple of years that are tied to Prince.
Okay. And Paisley Park is not included, right, because it's beyond the 1987?
Yes, exactly. That's not to say that at some point in the future we don't see a nomination on Paisley Park.
It just seems like that should be the end place that he stopped at, kind of thing, instead of excluding it. But however you put it together, that's fine. That's it.
Thanks, John.
So, Madam Chair, this is Frank White.
Hi, Board Member White. How are you?
I'm wonderful. So I don't know if we're going to take a vote on this, but after we have a vote and before we move on to the next one, I have a little story to share, similar to what I did last time about my great uncle being on the fire department in St. Paul, one of the first African American fireworks. So I do have a personal story to share about this.
Go, Frank, go. Tell us.
Well, okay. So as you read in this, his mother's name is Mattie Dell, right? And then his father, so Mattie Dell had a twin sister, Edna Mae. Mattie Dell and her husband had a son named Prince. Edna Mae and my uncle Gene White had a son named Darnell. So I never met Prince, but that kind of gives me a little hook, doesn't it?
Frank, this is John Stark. I have a one-off of church member of ours. He was sitting with Prince at the time. Warner Brothers called and told him they were going to sign the contract with him. So, but he was friends with his brother, Michael White.
Oh, isn't that it? So that's my cousin.
Is that your cousin?
Yeah, Michael is Darnell's brother.
Oh, cool.
Or actually, I should say stepbrother, because unfortunately, and I only found this out, actually my uncle Gene had a affair with Edna Mae, and his wife at the time was Christo, and Michael's mother is Christo, but there are a number of in that family, but they all considered themselves cousins to Prince.
Pray for him. He's going through chemo right now.
This is
back to the meeting.
Chairperson Anderson, I don't have a question, but I was so impressed with all the information and all the work, and I just wanted to thank Kristen and Jessica and Barbara for an amazing piece of research and writing, and we get some amazing stuff, but this is kind of above and beyond, I think, because of the nature of the document. But I just wanted to compliment you on it and thank you for all that work.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments or questions from the board?
This is Mary, and I want to second what you said, Kristen. This is just an amazing document, and I am really impressed with how you figured out the one recording studio based on an ice cream shop.
Yes, this is Kristen. Yes, that was one of the more frustrating properties to figure out, but absolutely one of the most fun and most gratifying when I finally put the pieces together.
Very cool. Any other comments or questions about this?
Board Member Decker.
Hey, John.
Prince is an icon. So I know, Chris, that he's not Sinclair Lewis and his boyhood home and anything like that, but in the future, you will be Elvis to Graceland, that type of thing. So that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, John.
Yep.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Dennis and Amy, do we take a motion and vote and all the rest on this? Is it part of the same procedure?
Yes, Kristen, if you could take a vote, should forward this to the keeper.
Okay, first we need a motion for that.
Chair Anderson.
Let's see, was that Chris?
Philip Koski.
Philip, yes, Philip.
I would like to enthusiastically move that we forward this to the keeper of the National Register.
Thank you. Board Member Koski makes a motion. Is there a second?
John Stark, second.
Warner. Oh. We're going to fight over
Be
it.
quick.
Okay, I heard Board Member Stark loud and clear, so we'll give him the honor of second on this. Any other discussion? Okay, here we go. Alphabetically, Chair Anderson votes yes. Board Member Brunfeld?
Yes.
Board Member Decker?
Absolutely, yes.
Board Member Dyer?
Yes.
Board Member Koski?
Aye.
Board Member Vassar?
Yes.
Board Member Mann?
Yes.
Board Member Olson?
Aye.
Board Member Schulke?
Yes.
Board Member Stark?
Aye.
Board Member Warner?
Yes.
Board Member White?
Yes, of course.
Okay, thanks very much. Dennis takes a drink as he prepares for sound.
Can you?
Dennis. Yeah, that's the thing. You have to be visible. I'm just saying. Everything you do, man.
I thought I was hidden from everybody.
No, sir. No, sir. That's what the video off is for. If I weren't chairing the meeting, I would be video off myself. But Dennis, are you ready for Sound 80 in Minneapolis, Hennepin County?
Yep, I am. Yep, this is Sound 80, Minneapolis, Hennepin County. The author is Kristen Jomler, with contributions by Barbara Mitchell Howard of Stonebridge Learning. Sound 80 was the preeminent recording location in the Twin Cities during the 1970s and early 1980s, and was also recognized nationally. The state-of-the-art facility attracted several prominent artists, including Bob Dylan, Cat Stevens, Leo Kottke, and Prince Rogers Nelson, best known simply as Prince. And here we're looking at the north facade. Our view is to the south. The studio is located in the Seward neighborhood in Minneapolis, to the southeast of the downtown core, roughly halfway between the flowing Mississippi River to the east and Hiawatha Avenue to the west. The property is highlighted in red in the map at left. In the overhead view at right, we see the building at the southeast corner of the intersection of East 25th Street and South 27th Avenue. Here we see a plan of Sound 80. The first floor is at left, while the basement is shown at right. It has a curiously shaped footprint, essentially a rectangular building with two projecting bays angling out from the north facade at 45-degree angles. The minimalistic-looking building is one story with a flat roof and formed of concrete block. It was once coated in granulux, which is a marble and granite aggregate in a plastic binder. The bond failed almost immediately, with water seeping behind it and the concrete block. It soon began falling off. The only part of the building where the coating remains completely intact is inside the east vestibule, where it was protected from the weather. At left, we are viewing the north facade and looking to the southeast, while at right is the west elevation with a view to the northeast. Foliage somewhat obscures these elevations. At left is the south elevation with a view to the northwest, and at right is the east elevation, also with a view to the northwest. The principal entrance to the building is at the north end of the east wall, which we see in the photo at left. Our view is to the west. The door opens into a vestibule where we can see the intact granulates on the walls. That is apparent in the photo at right, and the view there is to the south. The image at left is of the interior lobby with skylight. Today, a section of the wall at far left is covered with a display of recordings. Our view is to the northwest. The photo at right is the former Office of Sound 80 president and co-founder Herb Pillhofer. Note the wall paneling and louvers. The view is to the northeast. The photos at top left and bottom middle show Studio 1. In the top left image, the live room is in the foreground, with the control room and sound lock in the background. We are looking to the southwest. In the lower middle image, we see the control room at far left, with the live room occupying most of the image to the right. The photo at upper right is of the hallway that runs between the various studios and other spaces. The view there is to the southwest. Both views we see here are Studio 2. In the image at left, the control room is in the background. The sound lock is at far left and leads to the hallway. The view is to the south. The photo at right has the control room at far left. Note the original red fabric wall covering. We are looking northwest. Sound 80 was founded by Herb Pillhofer and Tom Jung. Both had worked at K-Bank, a studio located in the old Garrick Theater on Nicollet Avenue. Both became disenchanted with the studio because of its pedestrian recording equipment. Moreover, the theater was hardly soundproof, which interfered with the recordings. They opted to leave K-Bank and create their own studio, taking with them sound engineers Gary Erickson and Scott Rivard. Initially, they worked out of Pillhofer's house, investing in top-of-the-line equipment. Incorporating as Sound 80 Inc. in 1969, the company soon located a site for a new building southeast of downtown Minneapolis at the intersection of East 25th Street with South 27th Avenue in the Seward neighborhood. Sound 80 hired Douglas A. Baird, a Minneapolis architect, and nationally renowned acoustical engineer Robert Hansen of New York to design the studio. Embracing the latest acoustical standards, the building was built with concrete block walls, sound locks, sound retardant doors, and acoustical ceiling tiles. The studios proved so soundproof that sessions could take place concurrently in both Studios 1 and Studio 2, which were directly across the hall from each other without any cross-contamination. The building was opened by 1971. The 1970s image at left depicts the pioneers of Sound 80. From left to right, co-founder Herb Pillhofer, co-founder Tom Jung, sound engineer Gary Erickson, business manager Jan Erickson, and sound engineer Scott Rivard. Interestingly, the first recording session at Sound 80 was before the building was even completed. The 1970 session is shown in the photo at right, within the far from finished concrete block foundation. Co-founder and sound engineer Tom Jung is at the far left and is recording the session by the band The Patch. Sound 80 immediately began advertising its services, as shown in the 1971 image at left. The ad ran in Billboard magazine. Another advertisement for the studio is at right and dates to 1973. Soon, the studio was drawing major artists, including Cat Stevens, Bob Dylan, and Leo Kottke. But it also drew orchestras, such as the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, which we see at left in Studio 1 in 1978. The photo at right depicts a St. Paul Chamber Orchestra session as well, as viewed from the control room. Sound engineer Scott Rivard is at far left. In 1978, Hollywood director and special effects expert Douglas Trumbull arrived at Sound 80 to work with staff to develop an experimental process to improve the sound quality of films. Trumbull was working on the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind at the time. The system developed at Sound 80 ultimately proved too complicated for theaters to implement in time for release of the film. However, the system led to advancement in surround sounds employed in theaters today. In the 1978 photo shown here, Douglas Trumbull is seen at far right. Of all the musical artists who spent time at Sound 80, few rivaled Prince Rogers Nelson. Prince was in the forefront of a new music genre that would sweep the country in the late 70s and into the 80s, and is commonly known as the Minneapolis Sound. He was a musical prodigy, mastering the piano by age 8, songwriting shortly thereafter, then taught himself guitar and formed a band when he was a teenager. In the late 1970s, Prince was in studio at Sound 80 recording his demo tapes. He had no backup band, singing all of the parts and playing all of the instruments himself. It was here where Prince mastered studio engineering techniques, which allowed him to produce his first album, and which was partially recorded at Sound 80. His mastery of his music and the engineering techniques allowed him complete control to create this new musical sound. Both of these photos date to 1977 and depict an 18-year-old Prince recording his demo tapes that landed him a contract with Warner Brothers. Both photos seen here show Prince in studio at Sound 80 in late 1977, where he was recording his first album for Warner Brothers. The album was titled For You. Sound 80 is not only being nominated to the National Register for its history, but also for its association with Prince. According to the overview document, Prince, 1958 to 1987, a multiple property documentation form completed in conjunction with the Sound 80 National Register nomination, Sound 80 is eligible for listing in the National Register for its association with the musician under the following registration requirement. Quote, recording locations will be considered eligible for listing in the National Register under Criterion B if they have a direct association with Prince prior to and including 1987 and are well documented as to their use as a recording location for songs or albums important to the development of the Minneapolis sound, for critically and or commercially significant songs or albums, or for Prince's mastery of studio engineering techniques. Sound 80 meets this requirement. Even with all of its success, after a decade of operation, Sound 80 came to an end, as its two co-founders had different creative visions. Pilhofer wished to write and produce film scores, and Jung had grown weary of the intricately engineered and overdubbed music that Sound 80 was so successful at producing. In 1981, Jung departed for a position in New York and Pilhofer closed the studio. Business manager Jan Erickson purchased the name and opened another business in Minneapolis under the moniker. The business specializes in talent payroll services, broadcast commercial trafficking, and audio and video production service. Our period of significance is 1971 to 1981. The level of significance is state, National Register criteria, A and B, area of significance, performing arts, music. And we had to take into consideration criteria consideration G with this property. The period of significance covers the period from when Sound 80 operated within the building. Besides the property being eligible for the National Register under criterion A, it is also eligible under criterion B for its association with Prince, as established under the NPDF Prince 1958 to 1987. As the events that give Sound 80 its historic significance are less than 50 years old, the nomination had to address criteria consideration G, exceptional significance. Sound 80's, as well as Prince Rogers Nelson's contributions to formulating a new musical sound, which became commonly known as the Minneapolis sound, satisfy the criteria consideration G requirement, demonstrating that Sound 80 is exceptionally significant. For a decade, from 1971 to 1981, Sound 80 was widely recognized as the premier recording studio in the Twin Cities. When it was constructed, it was state-of-the-art, with the latest acoustical engineering for recording music, while employing technical experts in the area of composition, recording, and editing.
It was also the location where one of the world's largest musical artists from the late 20th century into the early 21st century, Prince Rogers Nelson, mastered studio engineering techniques, allowing him to produce his first album and helping him to create a new musical genre. For these reasons, Sound 80 is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. And we do have one piece of correspondence, and just briefly, it says, I'm summarizing, in a letter dated May 8th, 2020, the Minneapolis Department of Community Planning and Economic Development, writing on behalf of the Minneapolis Heritage Preservation Commission, explains that the HPC unanimously supports nomination of Sound 80 to the National Register of Historic Places.
Thanks, Dennis. Anyone from the audience have any comments, statement to make about this nomination? Anyone from the board have any comments or questions? I see John Stark is typing. Board Member Stark, go for it.
Mute again. With the Orfield Labs that are in there now, it's a sound company and it fits into the building. It's a very unique building with its design and everything, the way it's laid out, and I can see a future tenant coming in when Steve someday retires. What would happen to that and just the control of that as a historic building? It's not a great piece of architecture looking at it, but it functions extremely well. I'm just curious about that process of where that would go, or the control of changes to the space.
Can you hear me? This is Steve Orfield.
Oh, yeah.
Can I be heard?
Go ahead.
Yeah. We're in the process of trying to institutionalize preservation of the building for both the things that we do, because we're the only multi-sensory design research lab in the world, and to preserve the historic nature of the building. So we've been investigating creating a nonprofit foundation and moving those assets into a nonprofit foundation to preserve it. So we very strongly believe that will happen, and that the building long into the future will serve both the interest that we brought to it and the interest that Herb and Tom, who are good friends, brought to it.
That's excellent. Thanks for doing that, Steve. And when I was reading this, it was very interesting just reading about the whole thing. I ran downstairs, found my old LP from high school, Owatonna High School, May 1974, Sound 80 came down and recorded my high school choir as I'm singing in it. So I have a very small piece of this and a pleasure to listen to that.
Actually, some recordings that were done related to Wenger Corporation.
They could have been, yeah.
We actually created demonstration recordings for Wenger, and they were the first acoustic simulation recordings that had been done in the world. And we used our acoustic simulation lab, which was originally one of the smaller studios, and we recorded anechoically, in other words, with no reflection, your orchestra and your band, and then we processed and added different levels of sound and reverberation and other characteristics to demonstrate what Wenger's band and choral room products would do to the sound for a school. And they actually made 250,000 records of those demonstrations and sent them out all over the world in catalogs.
Wow. And I went door to door selling the records to raise money for the high school.
So it's interesting that, and Herb and Tom have always impressed me with this, that we're a company that for 49 years has been deeply into acoustics, deeply into audiovisual. We developed the original recording standards for the rock bands that performed at the Metrodome after the Terrible Dylan concert. More recently, we designed the acoustics of the Armory, which the Star Tribune says is the best recording space in downtown Minneapolis. So Herb was very proud, and Tom was very proud, that we had a similar practice related to acoustics and sound. We also created the Sound Quality Working Group, the first psychological acoustics group in the world in that building, and taught Harley Davidson a world time. So there's lots of history that's continued there that had a lot to do with acoustics.
Wonderful.
Any other questions or comments or anything from the board?
This is Board Member Decker.
Hi, John.
And I have a question for Dennis. Dennis, no love for lip sync?
I'm sorry, I couldn't make out what you said.
No love for lip sync?
No love for
lip sync.
Oh,
lip sync.
Yeah, you're right.
It's Funky Town.
Yeah.
Okay, can anyone top Board Member Decker's last question?
This is Mary Warner. I can't top it, but I really appreciated the good argument made in this nomination for both Prince and the rest of what Sound 80 has done.
Thanks, Mary. Any other comments or questions? Are we ready for a motion? Oh,
I would.
Spong is typing. To say something.
I would love to make the nomination for Sound 80 for the National Register.
Board Member Stark.
Board Member Decker seconds it.
And in charge of that. I'm waiting on what Amy, just jump in. What are you going to say? Oh, a couple of comments before we adjourn. Got it. So we won't adjourn right away. Good. So any other discussion on this before we vote? Okay. Chair Anderson votes yes. Board Member Brunford?
Yes.
Thank you. Board Member Decker?
Yes.
Board Member Dyer?
Yes.
Board Member Koski?
Aye.
Board Member Lavasser?
Yes.
Board Member Mann?
Yes.
Board Member Olson?
Aye.
Board Member Scholke?
Yes.
Board Member Stark?
Yes.
Board Member Warner?
Yes.
And Board Member White?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. And that's the end of the agenda, but for Amy Spong, who has a thing or two to say. Amy, you're on.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Chair Anderson. So I must have been sleeping through the very first agenda item on any announcements by State Historic Preservation staff, or I'm not sure what happened there. But I do have just a couple announcements for the board, 3 of them, actually. First is, we have engaged the board members over the last probably year and a half on our statewide preservation planning efforts. And it's been a little while since we've brought any updates back. We have come to the board with some planning updates at various times. Because of the pandemic, we are going to be asking for another extension by the National Park Service. We already have an indication of acceptance for that. Right when all of this happened in March, we were about halfway through in our engagement process with the 11 Minnesota tribal communities and meeting with the TIPOs, and we want to really continue doing that in a meaningful way. So we took a little bit of a pause, and so that timeline that you were given the last presentation, that we were going to have a draft out to the public for review and comment during the summer months is not going to happen. But I just wanted to let the board know that that's where we're at. We're kind of we're gathering back together, and we're going to be looking at a revised timeline for that. The second announcement I have is just a heads up. So if we would have been hosting this meeting in our typical way at the Minnesota History Center, this would have actually been the last meeting, State Review Board meeting, that we were going to hold at the Minnesota History Center. We had a joint powers agreement, the SHPO did, with the Minnesota Historical Society after we transitioned out of the building and into state government. And so Michelle, prior to the pandemic, Michelle was doing great work in locating a couple really great options for us that had easy access, good access to technology, all those types of things, parking, just looking at the facilities. So more to come on that. And our next meeting, Michelle or Dennis, is it August, I believe? We may be doing this virtually again, but I just wanted to let folks know that that we are looking for a new, more permanent location when we can actually be together or partially be together. We'll see how this transition goes. And then just finally, we also talked, I don't remember how long ago it was, with this board about the proposed National Register rulemaking process that had been happening. You may recall that we, the SHPO with the State Review Board, put in a letter, comment letter, as did thousands of, the Park Service received thousands of comments, the vast majority disagreeing with the proposed rule changes at the National Register level. And I was in DC for our annual National Conference of SHPOs in March, and the acting associate director of cultural resources, partnerships, and science at the Park Service did inform us at that time that she's been directed to move forward with that final rulemaking process. And so this spring, they were essentially going to be preparing responses to the substantive comments on that rule. And then the rule would have been out for a 90-day interagency review period. And the final rule was going to be planned to be published mid-summer. We have not gotten any updates on whether or not that timeline is changing given the pandemic. But I just wanted to let this board know that those things were moving forward, and that was the latest update that we had gotten. SHPOs essentially got when we were all meeting in March. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. And anybody else have anything that we need to deal with before we adjourn?
Yes, I would like to stop to speak to it. This is Pam. I would like to speak to a staff member after the meeting adjourns.
How do you want to handle that, Dennis, Amy? Should she call you back, or what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, Pam, could you just stay on?
Yeah, stay on the line, Pam. We can talk to you through the conference line.
Good, thanks,
It's not
Pam.
a big deal, but I need to tell you something.
Sure, yep, just stay on the conference line afterwards.
Okay.
Anything else before we adjourn? And is there a motion to adjourn?
Chris Schulke, so moved.
Thank you, Chris. And that's all it takes, right?
That's it.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.